Good morning to all. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to discuss about the generic elements of a blockchain. So we have discussed about a blockchain with respect to its architecture, with respect to its history, and with respect to the nature of distributed environment. Now I'll be discussing more about the generic elements of a blockchain. So to speak up widely, we have various elements associated with a blockchain, and as the name itself implies, it is a collection of blocks which are all linked with each other in the form of a chain. So, when we talk about a blockchain, block plays a very prominent role and it is the most popular and required foundational element of a blockchain. So, the first block of a blockchain, as we can see here, is a Genesis block. So here the first block of a blockchain is a Genesis block. And this block, in addition to containing various other elements, it also contains the details about the transactions and data. Now, what is a transaction? So this transaction is any action, any amount which has to be transferred or any action which has to be performed is represented as a transaction. And in order to execute these transactions, they need to be accommodated inside a block. So every block is connected to every other block through the addresses. So we can see here at the topmost level, we have a previous hash. That is, the previous block is connected to its previous block through the hash value. So usually we have seen the properties of a hash, and even the 256-bit hash value is used to represent a unique identity for any block. So here also the previous block hash value is represented as a unique address. And this hash value acts as an link to connect a block with its previous block and subsequent blocks as well. Now looking in detail about the elements, as we have already discussed, address, which is a unique identifier used in a blockchain to denote the senders and recipients. So usually an address is taken as a public key or it can be derived from a public key. Transaction, it is a fundamental unit of a blockchain, and it represents the transfer of value or assets from one address to the other address. Now these transactions have to reside inside a block, so hence a block is composed of multiple transactions, and in addition to that it also contains various other elements such as previous block hash, which is known as a hash pointer, timestamp, and the nonce value. So this nonce value is used to represent a number that is generated and used only once. And usually it is used in different cryptographic operations to provide authentication, encryption, and also to provide protection from the replay attacks. So this is a composition of a block, and to understand better the various elements of a block, as we have discussed that a Genesis block is the first block of the blockchain, and it is hard coded when the blockchain was first created or started. Okay, the structure of a block is also dependent on the type and design of a block, and every block except the Genesis block also includes a reference to the previous block. That is because Genesis block is the first block, it does not have any other blocks before it. So that is why this block does not have previous block hash as its element. Other than this, all the other blocks are having that particular element. And timestamp is again another important aspect which is required and which is associated with every block during its creation. Now, talking about the generic structure of a block, so as we can see here, every block is a collection of set of transactions. And this block is divided into two parts. The first part is the block header, which contains details about that particular block. And the second part is a block body, which composes of the different set of transactions which can be addressed to various other blocks across the network. So when we are talking about block header, it contains certain primary elements in addition to the elements which are mentioned here. So the primary element is it contains a pointer to a previous block. It contains a nonce value. It contains a timestamp. It also contains the Merkle root. So this Merkle root, it is the hash value of all the transactions associated with the Merkle tree. So what is Merkle tree? I will be explaining that in my upcoming videos. And timestamp is the time required, time at which a particular block is created. This is timestamp. And nonce is the value which is generated at the time of performing any operation or creation. And coming to list of transactions. So suppose there are multiple blocks in a network. Let me say the block is labeled as B1 and this block is labeled as B2. Now this B1 contains some set of transactions and B2 also contains a set of transactions. If you wanted to make a transaction, it need not be associated with only one particular node, but we can have multiple nodes across the network. So let me say, if we wanted to send a transaction T1 from block B1 to block B1 associated with node 2, then this transaction can happen by representing the addresses of the senders and receivers appropriately. So address is something like a unique identifier that indicates the action to be performed from sender to receiver. And this is how we have a collection of nodes all inside a blockchain network. So this entirely is a blockchain which has a set of nodes. Each and every node, it has a collection of blocks. Each and every block in turn is having a collection of transactions, and these transactions are intended to a particular recipient. Hence the sender address, receiver address, all have to be clearly mentioned within this particular block. Now moving further with the other details of blocks. In addition to these details, the language that you need to use in order to make the transactions is essential. If you are using Bitcoin, then the scripting language or programming language is using a collection of commands which allows the nodes to transfer Bitcoins. But if we are using Ethereum, then in that case, we need to go with the smart contracts. Smart contract is basically a program which is run on the top of blockchain. It is written in such a way that the conditions are automatically executed upon satisfaction of a particular action. So usually it is said to be a very desirable feature, and it is not restricted to one particular application, but it can be built for various such applications. That's all in this video. Please like, subscribe and share my video. I'll meet you again in my next video. Thank you.